What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and another video, and today we've got an exciting one. A huge steering upgrade just got put onto my Jeep. Did take a few days to get everything sorted out, but she is all together and steers amazing. So I wanted to share this upgrade with you guys and why you should consider it as well. All right, guys, so what we installed in the Jeep is the PSC Hydro Assist RAM. So as you know, I did the PSC big bore box last year, so it's been on about a year, maybe a little bit less than that. But had that box on there, decided I wanted a little bit more, what's the way to put it, oomph to my steering. So I wanted a little bit more power. I noticed when I was in the rocks the last couple weekends I was wheeling, it was just impossible to turn the wheel in some situations. So I figured it was time to go ahead and do this upgrade. I thought I'd be able to hold it off a little bit longer, but it was definitely due, and I am so glad that I did. And again, guys, this wasn't something I was really planning on doing, but something after the last couple trips I was like, I think it's necessary. Now, I told myself I was done with the Jeep mods for a while, but I was wrong. So we went ahead and bought this upgrade from Northbridge 4x4. Again, do not forget, if you go onto their website, northbridge4x4.com, you can use the code DIRTHEAD for up to 20% off and free shipping over $70. So make sure you check them out, guys, and buy from their site because you do get a small discount. But the reason I went ahead and did this, like I said, I was in the rocks. Of course, I do have lockers front and rear, and with it locked in the front, it's really hard to turn that wheel when you're off-road and in the rocks. And I was in some sticky situations that I had to winch in that I probably could have gotten through with Hydro Assist. So I figured now is the time to go ahead and do it. So let me show you what I did to get this setup all arranged. And let me just put in a little thing here. If you're still on 37s or under, the big bore box is still a fantastic upgrade, but I would make one small change if you're going to go ahead and do that upgrade. Now, if you're going to get the big bore box like I did, do not make the mistake that I did, which is getting it without the Hydro Assist ports. Even if you do not think you're going to go Hydro Assist, it's better to go ahead and buy it with the ports, because if not, you are going to spend double the money, which is exactly what I had to do. So let me go ahead and get into what I had to do to get this setup all arranged, being that I did not have the ports on the box. Alright, guys, so what I had to do first and foremost was I had to upgrade my box to the one with the ports. So what I did is I went ahead and swapped out the boxes. I went ahead and went with the PSC big bore box again. First and foremost being the strength that provides. The Schecter shaft is just so much bigger, and it gives you that confidence while you're off-road. So I went ahead and went with the PSC again. There is a couple other brands out there I considered. West Texas Off-Road being the first one, being that I could get the setup a lot cheaper, but being that I already had everything PSC installed in here, I wanted to go ahead and keep everything PSC. They're a great company with great customer service, and I would recommend them to anyone. But I went ahead and swapped out the box first and foremost, which again, if you watch my video, I'll try to link it up here. But if you watch that video, I showed you how to replace the box. It's very easy, but I will say you will need a friend when you're installing that box. So as you can see, guys, the box is right up here, and let me tell you, it is really hard to get that box up there. It is a good 60 pounds, and it's very awkward. So what I did, I removed the drag link, removed the track bar on this side, not the axle side, and I actually jacked up the Jeep to give me some more room up there. And that did make it easier, but I did have to have a buddy on this side as well, giving me a hand, and also have the bolts ready up here to get everything situated. So one thing to keep in mind when you are installing the box, I did say this in the previous video mentioning the big bore box, but you have to use their bolts for the front two and the stock ones for the back two. Make sure you do that, because if not, you will have trouble. And again, just to reiterate, that box is extremely heavy and really awkward. So you are going to need a buddy. Do not try to do this by yourself, because you will end up hurting yourself. I promise. It's not easy to do unless you're a bodybuilder. It's going to be very tough. So there's something to keep in mind there. But I know you guys are probably thinking, you know, it's really dumb for me to spend another $1,300 on a new steering box when I don't need one. And you're right. But with the wheeling that I want to do this year, with what I want to do with this Jeep moving forward, Hydro Assist just makes sense. It is the next step in the evolution of this Jeep, and it's something I've been wanting to do for a very, very long time. Just didn't think I would ever get to that point, and I am there. So it is something that, again, probably not the smartest thing that I bought the non-ported, and now I have to go back and do the ported box. but to me it's worth it because the feel of this steering with that hydro assist on is unbelievable, and I cannot wait to test it off-road. All right, guys, so the next step in my situation was I went ahead and brought the lines from the very top, with the ports, of course, took the caps off, and I ran the lines down here to the ram. So that was the next step for me. Now, of course, if you are installing the whole kit like they sell it as, the next step for you is probably going to be installing the cooler as well as the reservoir and pump. Now, if you're going to be running the hydro assist, the full system, I would recommend you go with the pump and the cooler. First and foremost, it's going to run quieter. So with the stock pump and hydro assist, if you do that, it's going to be a lot louder. It's probably going to whine a little bit just because it's putting a lot of strain on that pump. It's not meant to push that much volume. So I would recommend that you do the whole kit if you can. If you have to do it in pieces like I did, nothing wrong with that. Just be careful when you are using the kit without the full thing altogether, because it can put stress on a lot of other components too. So after you get the box in, you've got the lines together, and make sure you keep those caps that are in the box, because if you ever mess up this ram or mess up the lines, you can just cap off the steering box at the ports and it will still run your regular like stock feel and steering. So you can run this without the ram. You just have to make sure to carry the caps with you. So that's exactly what I did. I carried both caps are in my Jeep now for whenever I need them, if I do have to use them. So definitely something you want to do moving forward. But once you get those lines ran down, now it's time to go ahead and get the ram installed. So let me show you what I did to get all this set up. All right, guys, so there's a lot of ways that you can run this ram, a lot of ways you can set this up. For the JK, I think this is the best option here. So what I did, or what I had a friend do, was go ahead and weld on these tabs for me. So that's going to be the biggest step in this install here, is finding someone that you know that can weld, or teaching yourself how to weld if you'd like to go that route. I know that's the route I would like to go in the future here. So who knows, maybe some videos down the road of learning to weld and things like that. But at the time, I don't have a welder and I have not done it before, so I went ahead and got a local Jeeper to do it for me. So we got those all welded up, got them mocked up. You want to make sure that you mock them up before you weld them on, of course. I know it's pretty obvious, but make sure you mock them up so that all the clearances are good, and the ram's not going to interfere with anything else. So that's the biggest thing right there, is making sure you mock it up correctly. And the next step after you get that all mocked up and get that welded on is to go ahead and put your clamp on as well. So I went ahead and went with the PSC clamp. The reason I went with them is because they make this whole setup. So I do trust this. Now, what I'll probably do in the future is go double shear. But right now, this is the best option I could find that was on stock and ready to go. So I went ahead and went with that. Now, if you're wondering what ram I went with ahead and went with the setup that PSC recommends for the JK. So if you look up on their website, the JK full hydro assist kit, this is the exact ram and setup that they recommend for the JK. And once you get everything in place, you want to leave one end off, so you can test to make sure that you hooked up the lines right. Now, in my case, and I think this may be all cases, but you may want to just be on the safe side on this. For me, the longer passenger side line here went to the one closest, the port closest to the firewall, and the one that was closest forward went to the driver's side here. I think that's always the case, but just to be on the safe side, what I did is I left one end unhooked. In this case, it was the clamp end. I left it unhooked, and I went in and turned the steering wheel back and forth, of course, with the lines hooked up. You have to have the lines hooked up for that to work. But I went ahead and turned the steering wheel just a little bit and noticed that it was working just fine. But you want to make sure that when you turn it driver, it's going driver. So that's a big one there, because you can destroy some stuff if you don't. After you get that all situated, make sure everything's hooked up correctly, make sure there's no leaks. The next step is going to be bleeding the system. So if you just did the hydro assist, you already had the box, probably won't have to bleed it as much, but if you replace the box as well, you're going to be doing a good amount of bleeding this system. So for me, it took me about half an hour, maybe even an hour, to get the entire system bled. First and foremost, you want to make sure you put the axle on jack stand so the wheels are off the ground, and you want to just go back and forth without turning the Jeep on a few times. And PSC does have a recommendation for this. I'll try to list it in the description below. That way you guys have these directions for bleeding the system. But if you watch the Auto Edits video up here, he also shows you how to bleed the system too. It's fairly easy, but it does take a lot of time to get all those air bubbles out. So make sure that you do not drive the Jeep before you have those air bubbles out. Otherwise, you'll have some dead spots and it will not steer right. Another thing I forgot to mention here, guys, you want to make sure that the ram is parallel with your tie rod, or as parallel as it can get. It just makes the steering a lot easier of a setup. Now, one other thing to keep in mind as well, if you have the Ultimate 44 like I do, this bottom bolt does work with this bolt. PSC does not recommend that you run it that way. It's not strong enough over time to hold that. So make sure that if you are going to do that, you do it temporarily. I ran it for just one test drive, and I felt sketchy about it. So you want to make sure that you do get the tabs welded on. That's the best way to do it, the best way to run it, and the strongest way to run it. And another thing too, when you're testing all this out, making sure you're good to go, make sure that at full lock you're hitting the bump, or you adjust the bump so that you are. That's the best way to make sure that the ram is not too far one way, too far the other way. That's the best way to make sure everything's good. What I did is I went full lock, made sure I was touching, made sure the ram was good on both sides, and that was perfect. That was perfect. That's all you have to do. That way it gets all leveled out even in the front. Now, another thing you can do as well that I've seen a video on is you can also make measurements on your tie rod here at full lock. That way you can easily measure it out. Either way is totally fine. I like the more practical application where you're actually looking at full lock to full lock. That's just how I like to do it, and it worked out perfect for me. Now, once you have the system bled, you're good to go. Take a test drive, make sure everything feels good, make sure it feels right. So I'm gonna take you guys along with the test drive as well, but I wanted to also say, you know, why would you want to do this upgrade, or when should you start considering this upgrade? And that is once you hit 37s. If you're on 37s and you do rock crawling or even just like medium level off-roading, you're probably going to want to start considering this, and it may be something that you have to test out and kind of feel for to see whether it's something you think you need, because not everyone's going to need this upgrade. This is not something that everyone should go get. It is a great feel in the steering, and it does give you a lot of control, and it also, in my opinion, makes the Jeep drive a lot better on-road. So it's not just an off-road upgrade, it's also an on-road upgrade, and it's something that I would highly consider for you guys if you're over 37s or considering going over 37s with your build. And again, guys, do not make the same mistake I did. If you're gonna go with this kit and you wanna piece it out, or let's say you wanna go with the Adventure kit and save a little money for right now because you don't need hydro, make sure you get the box that has the ports. It's worth every penny. Even if you never go hydro assist, you're in a much better spot than you would have been if you bought the $1,000 box that did not have the ports, and then you have to go and buy the $1,300 box that does. So just make sure you plan out your build. Buy once, cry once. Do not cheap out if you think you're going to want to go hydro later on down the road. And one thing as well, guys, if you do not have a welder, you don't know a welder, you don't want to mess with all that, they do make a bracket for the stock JK axle to where you can just bolt it on. Now, is that the strongest, best option long term? No. But if you want to do something that's going to last you a little while until you find a welder or know someone that can weld, then that's a great option to go. They do include it with the cylinder assist kit if you'd like to do that, so there is an option for that. Just make sure you plan it out well. If you know you're not going to be able to do that, make sure you get the bracket, that way you can run it that way. All right, guys, what we're going to do next here, we're going to go on a test drive, going to see how this thing drives on the road so that you guys can kind of get an idea of what the feel is like, so you can kind of decide if it's something that you want to do for your Jeep as well. So let's go ahead and go on a test drive. All right, guys, so one thing right off the bat here, it is a lot more, I don't want to say touchy, but the inputs are immediate. There's no like lag in the steering like there is with a stock setup. Everything is pretty immediate. Now that's to be expected because again, you have a cylinder, a ram down at the bottom there that's pushing fluid as well. So that's one big advantage. I know with the stock box, even the big bore box without the hydro assist, there is still a little bit of lag, and that's something that you're going to have to expect in any like stock steering setup, just the way it's all put together. Now, there was a lot less of a lag with the big bore box, I'll say that right now. Definitely has a little bit more of a sporty feel to it, so that's something to consider there if you just want to do the box. Now, another thing I noticed here as well, just within the first 5 minutes, is that there's a lot less steering input needed to keep the thing going straight. Now this is something that Auto Edit said in his video as well. It's definitely something that's pretty clear, even in the first 5 minutes of this test drive. This thing goes straight, unless you're moving the wheel, which is really nice because, you know, sometimes JKs can wander, and that has a lot to do with your alignment as well. But it's definitely something that's appreciated here on this setup. Is just a lot less inputs needed. The thing goes straight as an arrow. So it's definitely a lot better feel on road. Now another thing here as well is I'll hit this pothole right here. Did not move the steering at all. Usually with the stock setup and with the big bore box, when you hit a bump, your steering wheel wants to follow it. It wants to move around. Whereas when I hit bumps now, it does not move this steering wheel whatsoever. I mean, it's straight as an arrow every time I hit a bump. Something here as well is the steering wheel does return to center. Now, I was reading on forums that sometimes with the Hydro Assist, it doesn't want to return to center when you're steering it or when you're making a turn. I say a lot of that has to do with your caster. Mine must be pretty on point right now because I'm having no issues here. It's returning to center as is, and that's much appreciated. I do appreciate the return to center. So that's definitely something to look forward to with this upgrade as well. Another thing I'm noticing here is at slower speeds, like say below 35, steering's really firm, like in a good way, not in a bad way. It's a lot firmer. Once you get above 35, it gets a little bit more, not touchy, but a lot more of a lighter feeling in the steering wheel. So that's also appreciated. Really like the way this feels so far. Gonna take a little bit of getting used to, but definitely something I really like. Something I was looking for, and I have definitely found it. This is fantastic. And again, guys, I don't want to make it seem like I'm copying Auto Edit's on his review and like the end of it where he was talking about how it drives, but I have these same exact comments. I mean, the way this thing drives is phenomenal. Straight as an arrow, a lot less input needed. You're not fighting the steering wheel in these big tires here. Pretty much the exact same comments as what Auto Edit said. So not copying, just definitely the same feel that he's feeling there. All right, guys, final thoughts on the PSC Hydro Assist is just wow. Feels amazing on road. I'm sure it's gonna feel great off-road. That's really the main purpose of this upgrade. As for the off-road capabilities, they say you can literally move a boulder with this Hydro Assist. There's so much power. And that's one thing to consider as well with your other components, is to make sure those all are strong. You know, I wouldn't run a stock steering like tie rod and drag link with this setup. Not gonna be a good option long-term. But definitely a lot of power with this system. Cannot wait to test it off-road. If you are doing a mild amount of off-roading, I would highly recommend this upgrade. It feels amazing on-road. I'm sure it'll be great off-road as well. Definitely something to consider for a modification on your Jeep once you go 37s and over. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for today's video. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below. Again, this wasn't a very hard install, but it was something that did take a good amount of time just because you had to get things welded on, those tabs welded on. Also had to replace the box as well. So definitely took some time, but it is well worth it. I'm extremely happy with this upgrade. Again, it is a little bit on the pricey side of things. You can do this cheaper if you want to go with the West Texas off-road option. I've heard great things about them as well. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below, guys. Be glad to answer them. Make sure you like and subscribe for more Jeep and off-road content. And guys, we are getting really close to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to enter into the giveaway. I'll link the video at the end of this one. That way you guys can go ahead and enter into that giveaway. But again, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your Sunday.